What up YouTube, BonzEye here, back with another video. Today I'm going to be showcasing a mod I made for my own personal enjoyment in Victoria 3. In this mod, I imagine a scenario where the entire country of Papua New Guinea in 2022 gets transported into the year 1836 when Victoria 3 is set. And by this, I mean not just the entire population of people, but the entire island itself, along with all the island provinces and the mainland. Well, half of the mainland. Hashtag Free West Papua. This means that it's not going to be just the people that can transport it, but also the infrastructure as well, including their farms, roads, houses, and industries as well. I decided to add all these things as well because I felt that the mod was a little lackluster when it just had the population increase. So that's why I decided to add in the infrastructure and stuff from the modern day. And it made sense too because, you know, it's time travel. Also, as a meta reason, I wanted the country to be able to stand on its own 2 feet in this day and age, so that's why I decided to do that, so they have a bit of a head start when the game starts. Don't get me wrong, we'll still have a lot of work to do once the game starts, because obviously even as PNG is right now, we still have a lot of issues that need to be solved. So yeah, getting our economy really going, using that large population, most of whom will be peasants, and training up our military will also be a priority here in this mod. But the options are there to, go on and play a more dominance-focused game should we want it, and that's what I wanted. I wanted there to be the option for that. I didn't want to make us too underpowered or too overpowered, just right. Okay, so that's the basic premise of the mod. But I'd also like to acknowledge that I did do a video modding PNG into a leaked version of Victoria 3 that was leaked online a couple of months ago. That video was struck by Paradox Interactive for copyright and got taken down by YouTube, so yeah, I already have my first strike on YouTube. Thanks Paradox, I'm not salty about that, sort of, anyway. But yeah, I'm mentioning this because I will include some video references to that initial video, but yeah, in case you're wondering what happened to that video because you feel like you've seen this similar video to this before, basically you won't be able to find it on YouTube anymore because it was struck down. So that's just to clarify. Okay, intro done, disclaimer done. So now, ladies and gentlemen, let me take you on a journey across time and space into an isekai anime that isn't an anime or a typical isekai story, because it doesn't involve a single overpowered main character being transported into another world. No. Instead, it involves an entire nation of people being made overpowered and then being transported into another world. In this scenario, they get transported with their kunai houses and their house tamarans, their Yamaha boats and their Toyota Land Cruisers, their kundu drums and their garamots, their Samsung phones and their Huawei tablets, their SP bottles and their Trukai rice, their rugby league jerseys and their soccer balls, their birds of paradise and their unique orchids, their matrilineal societies and their patrilineal societies, along with their over 800 different languages, plus English and Pidgin. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen, as I try to take modern day Papua New Guinea into the time of 1836, Anno Domini, Jesus Christ. Okay, so I'm aware there's going to be a sizable portion of the audience watching this video who clicked on it because it said Papua New Guinea and have no idea what Victoria 3 is. So here's the quick breakdown. Victoria 3 is a grand strategy, nation-building geopolitical simulator, to put it lightly. And I know those are big words, but basically the idea is that you're playing as a country, and whereas in other grand strategy games where there's more of a focus on warfare and conquest in these games, in Victoria 3, whilst warfare and conquest is the thing, there is a lot of focus on designing the type of society you want. Again, it's a nation building political economics simulator, right? There's a lot of emphasis on what type of people you have living in your nations. Things like literacy rate and wealth are being tracked in the game, and people are divided not just according to like race and religion, but also into class, right? So you have your aristocrats, and then you have your capitalists, and then you have your your shopkeepers and your laborers, and then you have your peasants, right? People at the very bottom of society. So like, it keeps track of all of these different things, and based on the decisions you make, whether you choose to have a society that's very religious, or whether you choose to have a society that's very autocratic and have like a monarchy, or whether you want to break down a monarchy and transition into a republic, like all of these, the game is more focused on having all of these things be simulated in it, as opposed to just going out and conquering territory and painting the map your favorite color. Now, another reason for the game being made this way is because of the time period it's set in, the year 1836. For those of you who know your history, between 1836 and like 1920 or something like that, a lot of large societal changes happened to the collective human civilization as a whole during this time. Humanity saw things such as the rise of industrialization, women's suffrage, the ending of slavery, the birth of truly global trade, the culmination of European imperialism and colonization, and of course at the end of it, you saw the birth of truly industrial warfare with the beginning of World War I. Now, whilst the game does have a focus on Europe, because obviously this was the time when the Europeans take a step ahead of the pack, you can, however, play as any other nation that's on the map, provided that it is a centralized nation of some sort, right? They has to have like some sort of government or bureaucracy that works in them. So you can play as a small kingdom in Africa, or a sleeping giant in Asia like China or Japan. Now, Papua New Guinea, of course, as well as most of the Pacific Islands, weren't centralized states at this time. Obviously my ancestors were living here, but we didn't necessarily have we didn't even have like a king or anything like that. We just lived in little chiefdoms around the place. The main thing here is that we didn't have a centralized government, whether it be a king or a president who would represent all of PNG. Anyway, because of this, you normally can't play as Papua New Guinea, but obviously I wanted to be able to play as my own country in this game that I've been pretty excited to play for so many months now, to the point where I made a video about me getting an illegal copy of it and posted it on YouTube, only to get that video struck. But yeah, that's where this mod comes in. So yeah, with that, let's get right into the actual showcase part of this video, and you can see for yourself what I've created. Okay, so let's start off with the basic stuff, flag and borders. As you can see, I've already got the PNG flag added in, instead of whatever this was. It wasn't as simple as adding the PNG flag, by the way. Like, the way they designed their flag creator was that you had to find different elements and put them together and do some stuff with code, and yeah, anyway, it just made it harder instead of just like uploading a single image. But I managed to do it eventually after I figured out what all the numbers meant. Behold my early attempt, by the way. Why it's pink, I have no idea. Then I had to decide whether or not to include Bougainville as a part of PNG. It will become an independent nation within the next decade or so, I think. But for now, given that it's still part of PNG, I chose to add Bougainville to PNG. So we start off with two states, the mainland island and Bougainville. As for the mainland itself, to be honest, like I mentioned in my previous mod video, I would have much preferred if it had been broken up into 4 separate states rather than just one. I think I'll play a clip from that video just now. So yeah, as I pointed out and highlighted in the previous video, the 4 states each have their own particular strengths that allow them to contribute to the nation as a whole. So it would have been much better, in my opinion, if they had done that. But anyway, you work with what you got, and I think I have figured out a way how to split the states myself, but I'm not sure how to do it just yet. So that's why for now it's all just one state. Okay, so that's the flag and the borders. Now let's move on to the government, institution, and laws of the land.
And the government of the people, by the people, for the people.
So, as you can see, the aptly named Kumul Party, aka the Conservative Party, is the ruling party at the start of the game. This party consists of landowners and rural folks. And yeah, deciding which interest group specifically to put in this rural party was actually a tough choice to me, and thankfully I had some friends to throw ideas at, and they helped me narrow it down. So I knew, for example, that despite the church being particularly powerful in PNG, it's not like they have direct influence over the government. So I knew that, whilst they would be influential, they wouldn't be in government. And yeah, whilst we do have intellectuals and trade unions in PNG, none of them stand out to me as being particularly influential, so obviously they weren't going to be in government either. Our military as well is quite limited in Papua New Guinea due to underfunding and as well as lack of discipline in some of the members, so that's why I knew they also wouldn't be part of the ruling party. As for the petite bourgeoisie, the small shop owners and business owners and such, whilst some of them can be quite prominent and popular, they also don't have a lot of influence in the government. Thus, I was left with the two, landowners and rural folk, and after thinking about it, I realized that yeah, they actually do have quite an indirect way of influencing our government. So let's start with the rural folk, which I know for many of you at first glance might be a bit weird to think of. I mean, how does Damagere from this village and Sausagere from that village have any influence on what Marape is doing in parliament, right? But then when you think about how politicians are elected in Papua New Guinea, a lot of it really does come from grassroots efforts, right? Most of our politicians have to go out to villages and appeal directly to rural folks and give them promises, some of which they actually fulfill. Thus, indirectly, it could be said that the ruling parties of PNG do have to answer quite a great deal to the rural folk of Papua New Guinea. And as such, I felt, oh yeah, that actually kind of makes sense why it's not that, like I said, Damagere or Sausagere is in the parliament, it's that they basically decide who ends up in there, and the people that go in there, whether or not they actually go on to fulfill the promises or not, are beholden to Damagere and Sausagere. As for having the landowners in parliament, it really came down to two factors. So one, most of the wealthiest people in Papua New Guinea are landowners, right? Landowners who have oil in their land, like oil barons in PNG, and get a crap ton of money from that. Then of course, traditionally speaking, most of the people who are landowners are also village chiefs and clan leaders. So as such, they traditionally wield a lot of influence anyway. It's kind of the closest thing we have to an aristocracy here in Papua New Guinea. And so I felt that it made sense to have them in the government. And as you can see, the legitimacy is quite good, so that's why, all's well. Next, let's look at our laws and institutions. So our form of government is a parliamentary republic. I chose to have it this way because whilst Papua New Guinea is a constitutional monarchy in our day, upon transporting into this previous timeline, it didn't feel logical to have them spawn and then suddenly be a subject under the British.
Wait a minute! Who are you?
Thus, I went for parliamentary republic because it felt like a natural departure from where we are now. And of course, universal suffrage was given. As I mentioned, the rural folk in my country, whilst not the most educated, are educated enough at this point to understand the importance of having a vote and a right to decide themselves in the future of their nation. Also, given how my people can very easily be brought to violence if they felt that something of theirs has been taken from them, it made sense that, yeah, now that they have this right, there's no way they're letting some government take it away from them. When it came to culturalism, and when it really comes down to it, I felt that cultural exclusion was the best representation of what we have. Don't get me wrong, my people are very welcoming towards tourists and foreigners that come here. They really have no problem with foreigners when they come as tourists and set up businesses in the area. And also especially foreigners who have useful skills, people like doctors and engineers who come into the country and apply their trade to benefit the society. That said, there must be some level of understanding and mutual respect for these people in order for them to fully integrate with Melanesian society. So because of that reason, I felt that it might be a bit too much to have us be multicultural, and so I put us a step back on cultural exclusion. Now, as I stated also previously before, whilst the church is powerful, they aren't necessarily a political force in the country. So that's why I felt that the middle ground of freedom of consciousness would be the best thing. We have a lot of denominations here, and most Papua New Guineans would say that PNG is a Christian country, so that's why this felt very appropriate. Our economy system too was also pretty easy to decide. This will be a modern 21st century Papua New Guinea going back into the past, so obviously traditionalism and agrarianism is not going to be the economy system we follow. And also we're obviously not a communist nation, so that knocks out command economy. So thus between laissez-faire and interventionist, I don't really know where we actually fall, to be completely honest, but I feel like what if we were to get transported back then, it would make more sense for the government to be somewhat protectionist about our trade. Also, our government does interfere with the economy a lot anyway, so it felt more natural to be interventionist, at least to the lore of this mod. Okay, now I'm not 100% on the exact taxation methods that are utilized in Papua New Guinea, but everybody here knows about the consumption-based taxation, the VAT tax that we get on all our goods and services, as well as the income taxation that everybody gets on their salary. There are of course tax brackets in this country, and so it can be said that apart from the consumption-based income taxation, we have graduated income taxation. But I'm not really too sure on the specifics. I'm aware that it's a hybrid, but I can't say which one specifically would be more appropriate.
Wait a minute!
That said, as you can see, I didn't select either of those. Instead, I went for per capita taxation, and the honest to God reason is it's the one that makes us the most money. And I just wanted to start off with a comfortable profit. Obviously, over time, once the game starts, the end goal as far as taxation go is to develop our economy more, get more people into the formal sector, and thus progress on to one of the more income-based taxation system. Because as it says right there, per capita income taxation is not exactly fair towards the poor. But once we have a more developed nation, we'll also be able to develop better from the other forms of taxation. So for now, we're starting off with per capita taxation.
Oh crap, and I forgot to go over these two. So in terms of our army model, we basically just have a national militia, and internal security, we don't have an NSA to spy on our own people. So none of that.
Now, we don't engage in colonialism, but as you can see here, we do have the option to set it as a law. And often when I've been playing through this mod, that's the first law I try to push because I want as fast as possible to colonize West Papua. And for those of you who know this game well enough, you might find it a bit interesting why having the rural folk in the government would allow for colonialism, because usually rural folk don't like colonialism. But that's because I went out of my way to mod the rural folk ideology in this game, and I decided to take a page out of America's playbook and make the rural folk isolationist expansionist. So the whole divine manifest thing is now a PNG thing. So I felt that it was only natural that our people would feel that they want to go out and colonize the other Melanesian islands of New Guinea, and given that they're already in the government, it made more sense. So I wanted us to be able to quickly adopt colonialization and go on the offensive this time. The next three laws pretty much follow reality to a T. We of course have small local police forces everywhere, a pretty inconsistent public education system, and a struggling but functional public health system. Freedom of speech is completely legal in PNG, and of course we have no slavery and serfdom in PNG. Now, children are expected to be in school in this country, but nobody's out there stopping them from going out and gardening with their family, so it felt more natural to have the children be in the workplace. Now, the rights of women was somewhat controversial for me to do, because I feel like, technically we have women's suffrage, right? So I should put it all the way down. But I think culturally speaking, we're not necessarily there yet. And if you look at our technology screen, you'll see that I decided to leave off feminism as a technology that we'd already discovered, because it's true, people here are aware of feminism, but for the most part, we're not necessarily as into it as the West is, who, seem pretty obsessed with the stuff. So that's why I felt that property of women was more appropriate, because as you can see in the law, it says that women can own and property, and it even accounts for the fact that some women are in the workplace, which is accurate to PNG, but also accurate to PNG is the fact that most women are homemakers in Papua New Guinea right now. And so I felt that if I were to push it down more and get that -5 fertility rate, it might be a bit overboard, because we have a very high growth rate now. We have one of the highest growth rates in the Pacific Islands, at least, I know for sure. So that's why it only felt natural to have us be at that second level. Like, at the very least, we're not as some countries which are very strict on their females, but we do allow a lot of the rights, and women are perfectly capable of going into the workforce if they want to. So that's why I settled on property women. And of course, no social security and no migration controls. Now, let's move on to talk about buildings and infrastructure.
Build that wall.
So, starting off with New Guinea, as you can see, I've already added a sizable government bureaucracy, and this is because we have such a large population, and I also did some other things to the state to account for that, but I'll get into that later when I talk about state traits. More importantly though, you may notice that we already have a developing food industries in the country. This is because PNG actually, as far as I'm aware, when it comes to food industries, we're quite developed. We actually make quite a lot of food products in this country. So obviously if you're a foreigner you don't know about this, but in Papua New Guinea we know a lot about Chukai and Paradise Food, which makes all the biscuits and drinks. And then we have some other famous brands like Oxen Palm and Ramu Sugar. And of course our multitude plethora of coffee brands, which is easily the main agricultural export of this country. We even have a minister for it now. I'm also fairly certain we have a few steel mills, at least in Leh in our country, so that's why we also have a steel industry there. Other than that though, I'm not too sure about us having many other industrial factories in this country, so that's why I only put on those two that I'm quite confident about. Now, we also have 4 major universities in this country: UPNG, Unitec, Divine Ward, University of Goroka, and we have so many other minor colleges located all over the country. So as far as education goes, we're pretty good. The rest of the rural mining and agriculture, I pretty much just filled randomly, to be completely honest. The only factor would be that the largest number I would allow myself to get up to was 30, which I gave to coffee, which again is our main export. And then the rest I just sort of filtered down and gave numbers that I felt were fair when compared to that max of 30. You'll notice I also threw in a gold mine in there, which isn't originally in the game, as well as the capacity for coal mines. So I added in gold mine because we do have gold mines in this country and we do make quite a bit of gold. And as for the coal mines, we don't mine gold. I just kind of threw that in there because I felt like there was too much of a disadvantage not being able to produce coal on our own. So I gave us the capacity to build coal mines, but obviously we don't have any coal mines there. Again, I wanted to allow Papua New Guinea to be able to sort of stand on its own 2 feet to a certain extent, and coal is a pretty important resource during this day and age, so that's why I thought, you know what, might as well just throw it in there. Now when it came to Bougainville, I've never been to Bougainville, so the truth is I also just kind of arbitrarily made things here in Bougainville. The exceptions though was that I know Bougainville does have a good developing food industry, so that's why they also already have a food industry there. And obviously one of the largest gold mines in the world is located in Bougainville, so that's why I gave them a huge gold mine reserve in Bougainville, because yeah, it just reflects reality. So this brings me to the second to last aspect of this mod I'm going to talk about, which is the state traits. So these are basically traits I added to the states that allowed them to have a buff to deal with, especially the large population that they now have.
I'd rather be shiny like a treasure from a sunken pirate wreck.
So this brings me to the states themselves and the changes I've made to them in order to account for this large population. So firstly, I added a state modifier trait to both New Guinea and Bougainville to account for the population increase. So because this game isn't designed to have such a large population on these 2 particular islands, which I learned the first time around when I made this mod. Since then though, I've learned how to increase the number of arable land on these states. So that's why we're able to have such a large population on these islands without it being stated as overpopulated. I also went in and added in those gold mines as well as the coal mine that I mentioned earlier. So those are some changes I made to the states, as well as did a change where I swapped rubber as the undiscoverable resource for New Guinea for oil, because oil is also one of our major exports, and I think it's kind of funny that they listed rubber instead of oil as a potential hidden resource on New Guinea. Now, as for the state trait modifier itself, I'm not going to get into what each of these does. I'm just going to show them on the screen there. You can pause it and take a look at it yourself if you're an actual Wiki 3 person and you're watching this to see what it is. So yeah, like I said, overpowered, I know. With that though, we can move on now to talking about the last aspect of this mod I'm going to talk about, which are the people themselves.
And we give it back to you, the people.
So you see, I felt that modern Melanesians, while being the same as their ancestors, are quite obviously culturally different from our ancestors. You can remember from the beginning part of this video when I went out of my way to mention a whole bunch of things that make us different, right? The Yamaha boats and the Toyota Land Cruisers and the jerseys and the English language. So that's why I felt that I had to make a new group, a new race to better represent modern Melanesians. And because I don't know how to name things, I just called them modern Melanesians. So as you can see, when it comes to the traits of them, they have pretty much the same base traits as the original, indigenous oceanic heritage. And I also went on my way to correct a mistake that Paradox made. No paradox, Melanesians are not a type of Polynesian. We're actually a completely different group with a very different ancestral origin from Polynesians. That said, we all do live on the Pacific Islands and we do have a lot of similarities culturally. I guess because of the fact that we have a very similar, live in a very similar environment. So that's why our cultures do actually merge quite well together. And that's why we have such close bonds with Polynesians and Micronesians. We all Pacific Islanders feel a sense of camaraderie towards each other. Despite the fact that when it really comes down to it, we're actually from different genealogies of the human family tree. So yeah, I basically changed it from just saying Polynesian group to Pacific Islanders to refer to all of us collectively. Another change I made was to the Aborigines of Australia. So normally they have this trait that just says Aboriginal Australians or Australian Aboriginal. Unlike the Polynesians and the Micronesians, Melanesians and Australian Aborigines are actually part of the same genealogy. We do have a common ancestor down the line. So that's why I knew that there had to be a trait that we shared in common with them that we didn't have with the Polynesians and the Micronesians. And so I took that Australian Aboriginal trait and I changed it to Austro-Melanesian because we're one and the same, and that's actually a proper term, the last as far as I know. So, and then after changing it in the Aborigines, I copied it from the Aborigines and applied it to Melanesians and modern Melanesians to reflect the fact that we are in fact actually related to them. So finally, as a finishing touch, and also to differentiate the modern Melanesians from the old Melanesians, I went ahead and added an additional trait to the modern Melanesians, and that was the trait Anglophone, which obviously reflects the fact that most of us speak either English or Pidgin as a first or second language, and that is of course a language that is derivative of, well, English is of course English, and Pidgin is a language that is very derivative of English. It has elements from German and whatever, but mostly English, so that's why it made sense to have us have the trait of Anglophone. So that's the one trait that sets us apart from our ancestors. Anglophone is also a trait that's shared by other derivative British races such as the Australians themselves and the various American cultures like Dixie and Yankee. So yeah, that's pretty much as far as I've gotten with this mod so far. Things to come, I'm still trying to work out how to accurately divide the states and specialize it accordingly. But otherwise, I'm pretty happy with the way the mod is right now, and thankfully Paradox made their game in such a way where even with mods, achievements are still achievable. So yeah, I'm looking forward to playing the game with this mod and achieving some achievements, as well as having fun with it and developing the mod further down the line. So yeah, with that, this is where I'm gonna end the video. I do a lot of other content on my channel. I right now have an ongoing Let's Play of Crusader Kings, so if you want more content from me that's Paradox Gaming related, you can check out my current series, Melanesian Conquistadors. Or if you just want to check out any of my other videos, I've done other videos on my region of the world, the Pacific. I'm also a technological enthusiast, so I also like to do videos on that. But I also do a lot of movie reviews and gaming reviews on this channel. So if you're interested in a random Melanesian's take on any of that, you can subscribe to my channel down below and check that out. Oh, and don't forget to like the video if you like this video. So yeah, with that, this is BonzEye, signing out. Catch you all later.